Breaking news for you, and it's this. The new law to end two-tier justice will be published tomorrow, but it will not be in force until after Easter. And here's what the Prime Minister told GB News earlier.
I'm very disappointed in the response of the Sentencing Council on this issue, which is why we will now bring forward legislation. There's no other option, so we will do that. We will fast-track it, and the Lord Chancellor will set out further details.
Well, breaking news. We're going to now get some reaction to that by speaking to the barrister, Philip Taylor. Philip, welcome to the show. So here we go. It seems that Sir Keir Starmer is listening to GB News. Our viewers and our listeners were saying it seems inconceivable that Sentencing Council guidelines can give preferential treatment to women who are pregnant, to ethnic minorities, to homosexuals, to trans people, to people of a minority faith background. And the laws will now be overturned. What's your take on that?
Well, I think it's rather sad. I mean, Keir says he's disappointed. Well, we're rather disappointed in him, because the real problem is that the Sentencing Guidelines Council is like a number of other organisations. They're quangos, and they are organisations that have grown massively in recent years. They're not accountable really to anyone. And this is just one of the symptoms of the problem of the government just growing and growing. And we need some controls brought in. I welcome his decision to introduce legislation. But isn't he just getting into sticking plaster politics a little bit? Because we've had this sort of thing before where, we've got to legislate, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. We had the Dangerous Dogs Act, which was a really bad piece of legislation because it was rushed through. Let's take one step back and think about this before we start trying to tell the judges what to do. The real people who have to make the decision are the members of the judiciary based on actual reports, pre-sentence reports. And now what we're going to have with this type of approach is much more money having to be spent on pre-sentence reports. And I think perhaps it hasn't been well thought out, although I do recognise that we've got to do something.
What does the future hold for the Sentencing Council? I mean, if their guidelines are simply being battered to one side by the government and being outmoded, should we just get rid of them altogether?
Well, this is another interesting point, because there is a Labour MP who called for the Sentencing Guidelines Council to be scrapped. I personally think it should be scrapped. I take the view that the people who make the decision are the people who've heard the case, because you've heard all the evidence. You haven't heard a bit of it, which is a 1 minute segment, say, on the news or something like that. You've heard the whole lot. You've seen the witnesses, and you've read a lot of information. So it must be for the judiciary as the professional person to make the decision. Obviously, if something goes wrong, you have the Court of Appeal. So there is a proper mechanism already in place. But I do think the Sentencing Guideline Council have actually, what they've done is they've held the hands together of the judges so that they are limited in their scope for manoeuvre. And that's a problem which I think is an interference by Parliament with the independence of the judiciary.
Philip, a lot of people in the wake of the Southport riots, and perhaps unfairly, they called Keir Starmer two-tier Keir. They felt that people were being penalised for their political views on the riots, and they were sent to jail for Facebook addresses and the like. Will this latest position today go any way to addressing that, or is this more performative and lacks teeth?
No, I don't think so, really. I mean, again, you can call Keir a lot of names. I mean, it doesn't make much difference what you call him. He's actually doing a job which I think many Conservative supporters like myself are quite pleased with. He's introducing pieces of legislation which I, as a Tory, find acceptable. Now, I find that difficult because clearly, if I'm going to stand for election one day in the future, perhaps, I've got to work out whether I support what Keir Starmer is doing, because he seems to have taken policies which were Tory policies for his own. And now I'm not suggesting for one moment that he's nothing more than a socialist, which is what he is. But he's actually introducing policies which I would have expected the previous government to have done something about. They didn't, sadly, and they paid a big price. On Southport, obviously, that's a particular a particularly difficult problem because you had, again, a bit of an overreaction in some respects. You had to do something, but to start locking people up for really quite sometimes not that serious in terms of, obviously they were public order offences and other types of offence, but they weren't that serious. And I did feel sometimes that the balance had gone completely off the centre between what is a reasonable approach and what the public expect. They want to be protected, but they do expect people to behave in a sensible way. And I don't think politicians should be interfering that much with what the judges have to decide.
Thanks for your expertise. Pleasure to have your company, Barrister Philip Taylor. Thank you very, very much for joining us on the show. And I'm delighted to say we can speak with the Labour MP for Bassetlaw, Joe White. Joe, welcome to the show. So how do you feel about the Prime Minister, your boss, appearing to take on two-tier justice?
I very much welcome it. I very much believe that what we discovered was going to be introduced 2 weeks ago is absolutely shocking. Everybody has to believe or feel or know that they're being treated fairly in front of the law. And I'm very pleased that Keir is taking action. I'm disappointed that potentially the legislation will not be on the table until after Easter, but that's the way Parliament works. I also welcome that Shabana Mahmood, the Secretary of State for Justice, has also said that nothing's off the table. She's very much wanting to consider the future of the Sentencing Council. And so, people, the viewers, are being listened to. We cannot go on like this. We have to have equal justice for everybody, no matter what your background, your faith, your sexuality. Everybody has to be treated equally in front of the court.
Joe White, I wanted to ask you that because I had Lord Maurice Glassman in here last week, and he was saying that the Labour Party are actually starting to listen to GB News. You're paying attention because, our viewers totally agree. You should be equal before the law. You can't get a soft touch for your ethnicity, for your race, your sexuality. That isn't justice. That is two-tier justice. Now, Joe, are the Labour Party taking GB News to their bosom?
Certainly who I listen to are people who live in my constituency. And and I know, a lot of them watch GB News. So there is a strong dialogue there. So, yes.
Good. There we go. It's good to see that we're having an impact. Could I ask you also today about the migrant conference in London? Again, another thing that our viewers, and no doubt, well, I know for damn sure as mustard, my mum lives in Ashfield, next door to you there at Bassetlaw. I know that people in your neck of the woods care deeply about stopping the boats, controlling our borders. Do you think today's summit in London will make any difference?
It's about partnership with our international countries, our neighbours. This has 40 countries and organisations, including Meta, X, Twitter, who are very much part of the organised gangs method of communication. We have to have our feet working, and our border crime agencies and national crime agencies working in those countries right across the world. For example, we've now got the National Crime Agency based in Iraq, going after the gangs who are coming out of Kurdistan. If we don't have those people working there, we're actually giving them the opportunity to work across Europe. They are the kingpins. We have to break them apart. It's essential that those gangs are broken wherever they are, whether it's in Germany or whether it's in Iraq. We have to have partnership with our international neighbours in order to ensure that that's happening.
And yet, the numbers of illegal arrivals to our shores under the Labour Party have gone up. They've gone up 33%. So whatever we're saying about smashing the gangs so far don't seem to be listening.
Well, in comparison to last year, we've had some very, very calm weather, but we're pushing the legislation through right now. As is one of our key bills that's going through Parliament. And that will give Border Control the powers to pursue those gangs. We're giving them the equivalent to how we pursue terrorists. And that's why we need to work in partnership with other countries across the world. And we need to have those powers as quickly as possible. And so I was part of the Border Bill Committee, and we're moving at speed to ensure that we have the powers and legislation that we need to break up those gangs.
But Joe, I mean, you're absolutely correct to say that calm weather is just a red carpet rolled out. But the point is, there is no deterrence. As long as the calm weather comes, then the boats will surely follow as night follows day. If the Labour Party are listening to GB News, if you're channeling what our viewers and listeners are saying, then there's only one way to stop this tide, and that is to have offshore containment. That is to have a deterrent. Surely that's the answer. Yet, Sir Keir Starmer scrapped Rwanda on day one. But how about something else? How about doing a deal with another country around the world? Because until there is that deterrent, the boats will continue to roll ashore.
Well, what the refugee charities are saying, that nothing will stop them, because they believe that coming to Britain, because we speak English, will be their life opportunity. And what we have to do is break up those gangs who are bringing them across. It's a £10 billion industry. We have to break them up to stop that from happening. One of the things is that we're now working in much closer partnership with the French. That was broken down under the previous government. So we're working to stop them leaving the French.
Yeah, but the problem with the French deal, though, Joe, as you'll know, half a billion quid a year goes over, and we saw pictures last week of the French watching them, and they were up to their ankles in water. I've been in deeper baths. The French don't care. They don't want them to stay in their country. And as for the thing about we can't do anything about it because we speak English, what about Australia? Australia had the most successful policy on the entire planet, Operation Sovereign Borders. And that worked because they simply turned the boats around.
Well, by stopping the gangs, and that's the intention, and breaking them up, so there's no route across Europe to actually bring them here, is the best way to stop them. But I'm absolutely clear about this. Nothing's off the table. There's other things that we can and should be doing in order to stop people coming across. Let's get this legislation in place and let's see what happens. And if that doesn't work, I'm totally prepared to explore what we need to do next.
OK, superb. Thanks for joining us on the show. Pleasure to have your company. Labour MP for Bassett Law, Joe White. Thank you very, very much.
Us blokes hate talking about a little thinning up top, and many of us settle with that balding look, but that wasn't for me. And that's why I went to Elite Hair, the world's leading hair loss clinic, and now I've had over 4,000 new hairs added to this barnet, and very soon I'm going to be rocking some brand new flowing locks. And you can too. So how does it work? Step 1, I sent the team a set of photos of my head. Step 2, I then spoke to one of the Elite Hair staff who looked through my photo submissions and worked out a treatment plan for me. Step 3, Elite Hair then organised accommodation and the treatment. I was at their state-of-the-art treatment centre in Istanbul, and their incredibly kind staff took me through the process, and before I knew it, I was in surgery. Elite Hair and their leading medical experts have specialised in pain-free treatments using the Sleep Deep method, and they really mean that. I felt incredibly relaxed the whole time, and I haven't felt any pain since. Check out Elite Hair using the link in the description. When you do, Elite Hair will provide you with a free personalised hair analysis. Then you'll join over 100,000 happy patients. Hit that link and start your hair growth journey like I did today.
Now let's bring in GB News' political editor Chris Hope from Downing Street, who has that reaction to that breaking news for us. Chris, so there we go. The guidelines will be changed. The law will be changed. Finally, it seems that Sir Keir Starmer is listening to GB News.
Yes, Martin, well, if he's sensible, he will be watching and listening to GB News. Yeah, two things are happening. Tomorrow, Shabana Mahmood, who's the Justice Secretary, she will publish emergency law to repeal these guidelines from the Sentencing Council to ensure that ministers can overrule the Council in this narrow point of law. However, this law won't be enforced until after Easter. Easter falls on April the 20th, so we have 3 to 4 weeks of uncertainty for white men in front of judges starting tomorrow. But I can reveal, breaking in the past few moments, very strong rumours here in Whitehall. The Sentencing Council is about to suspend its two-tier justice guidance until after the law is changed. So it won't mean that any white man, frankly, will be discriminated against in the justice system. That is breaking this moment.
I wonder if they go a stage further, because the Sentencing Council, Chris, also recommends last week for first-time offences for illegal immigrants to be a mitigating factor. That could mean previously, if you entered the UK illegally without permission, you get 4 years in prison, but the Sentencing Council wanted that to go down to 6 months. So the Sentencing Council isn't just operating against white men, it's operating in violation, some would say, of our entire borders policy. Is the writing on the wall for the Sentencing Council, Chris? It seems like the knives are out for it.
I mean, hold your horses, Martin. We're just dealing right now with this new guidance that means that people of an ethnic, cultural, faith minority, young adults under 25, women or pregnant women will be treated differently in front of judges. They'll get their own pre-sentencing report, which could mitigate and reduce their sentences. But white men over 25 wouldn't get the same right. And that is where I think this comes in. That's why I've had widespread condemnation. Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, has called it two-tier sentencing. Sir Keir Starmer told me for GB News earlier today, it's not acceptable. He'll change the law very quickly. And of course, the Tories, led by Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary on this issue, have been very clear they disagree with it, even though it started under a last government. But I think you are right. I think the idea of the Sentencing Council to be so out of step, I think, with public opinion, and particularly with the elected ministers who run this country, means that it must be looking at its own future with some nervousness.
Well, there we go, Chris Oak. Breaking news. Perhaps unfairly, some called the Prime Minister two-tier Keir. And now here we have it, pushing back against two-tier sentencing guidelines. Chris Oak, thank you for bringing that breaking news for us live from Downing Street. See you in the next hour. Thank you.